Oh, hello again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the rise of masculinity. And I think this is a good thing. Not that masculinity is more important than femininity, I wouldn't say. I mean, we have men and women got to work together, right? But if you've noticed over the last quite a number of years, I'd say close to 100 years, the trajectory has been started out, ostensibly anyways, with the emancipation of women and the exercise of the franchise and so on. And like a lot of pendulum swings, this went to the extreme, right? Where it was presumed anyways that men had an advantage in society over women. The patriarchy it was called. And then it got to the point where men, I mean today, are basically abused, assumed to be the villains, if you will. The myth of male villainy, you might say. And of course, whenever you have an imbalance, it's probably not a good idea, right? Things go awry. And what we see now with the whole welfare state is it's predominantly a woman's state, right? Because women by their nature have to be cared for. That's why historically women had husbands. And if you notice, the so-called opposite of husband is wife, but they're not equivalent in terms of terms, because a wife just means a woman. So when a man says this is my wife, he's saying that's my woman. But when a woman says this is my husband, that doesn't, it is a man typically, but it's, at least traditionally, but it doesn't mean man. It means caretaker. This is the one who pays for me, who takes care of me, who protects me and provides for me. That's what that means. You look at the word, animal husbandry, ship's husbandry, and so on. It's taking care of, looking after. And the reason obviously is because women had to be, or historically were, during the productive years of their life, they were pregnant, lactating, and caring for children all at once. And therefore could not do the other thing, the other part of the family, which is, patrolling the perimeter, making sure that things are safe, and getting the major resources, acquiring the major resources to provide for that energy-intense activity of rearing children. What would happen, though, as you can see, is that women, by and large, no longer do what they traditionally did. Women are not lactating, pregnant, and caring for children during the productive times in their life. They've been, I would say, Western women have been propagandized into going into the so-called man's world so they could be liberated, right? And what happened was that women biologically and psychologically are still women. They still, even though they don't need to be cared for, they feel they need to be cared for, because women are very emotionally based, right? More so than men. So the state, which is a sort of a parasitic method of farming, the people in there understand, either overtly or sort of subconsciously, that they can sell women a bill of goods, and if they can sell women a bill of goods, generally the women sell the men on that. So like certain totalitarians in the past said, if you get the women under your thumb, you've got society under your thumb. And this is always bad. If you go, not necessarily because you get women under your thumb, it's that you seek to divide and conquer, right? Because that's the whole idea. And women and men have never been at odds with each other so much as they are now, because the family has been so largely destroyed. But what happened now is you have this massive pandemic. And I'm starting to see a coalescing, because often when there's a common enemy, which seems to be out of our control, people can come together again. And men, at the end of the day, are always going to be the protectors of society. And there's a huge amount of threat to the freedoms that have been long fought and died for in the West. And they are under threat big time because, like every good communist tyrant, you never want to let a good crisis go to waste. And you see that over and over again. It's no surprise that even though the pandemic hasn't played out according to what the models were, it is all the big government people who want more and more and more lockdowns and to continue all these rules and regulations and make sure they keep and hold on to all the government that they've been able to infuse into the minds of people. But I've seen it, and I saw a speech given by a guy to a group of police in California this morning, and he was very, very forceful. And this is the rise of masculinity, because as tyranny cranks down and cranks up, men are going to step forward. Strong men are going to step forward. And this is actually a blessing and a curse, because in times of struggle, you're always going to have a strong man step up. And a strong man doesn't mean a moral man. It means typically a very astute alpha male. It could be benevolent, it could be malevolent. And you see this in history. History is full of tyrants. And you usually see a good example is Hitler. I mean, Hitler rose out of extreme social strife in Germany, the levels of which most people can't even think of. I mean, Germany was brutalized after the First World War, absolutely brutalized. And then they had, of course, the Weimar Republic and hyperinflation, and of course, war was declared on Germany. A massive boycott against Germany, which almost starved them out after the war, like between the wars. And so the people of Germany, they opted for, a tyrant who was a good speaker, and he was able to touch on the points that they wanted, and led them down a very destructive path. At least according to the story. I mean, we never know the whole story of what was going on for sure, but this is the danger of it. So the rise of masculinity can be a good thing, and it could be for folly, and so on. I think the lesson for us in the Inner Genie Project, especially those of us who are men, is that we can learn from observing strong men in our society, especially good strong men in our society. But hey, we can even learn from the tyrants. We just don't want to do what the tyrants do, but we can learn from their energeticness and so on, right? And their speaking ability and so on. It is a time for us to muster our masculinity, because this is what we often need to get through the struggles. And I'm not trying to discount femininity here whatsoever, but masculinity is what protects our boundaries. It's what sustains our freedoms, typically in terms of a society, and it's what pushes back against creeping tyranny in society. It's masculinity, typically, I would say. And I think it's time to acknowledge that, but I'm noticing it starting to happen. And it's very predictable in a way, because men are men, and if you try to run roughshod over them, some of them are going to fight back. Let's hope that this goes with words as long as possible, because the other result is disastrous. Steve here again, great chatting. And by the way, I found this very interesting carving on the side of a stump in the park here today. And it's amazing what people will do and just leave for people to observe. It looked like it wasn't quite finished, because it looks like there was maybe a baby being carved here, but never finished off. Very interesting, isn't it? Talk again soon. Bye for now.